It's pretty remarkable. When I saw the percentages, 59% voting to support maintaining access to abortion, constitutionally protected access to abortion in Kansas, versus 47% who wanted to see abortion banned altogether, which was pretty insane. Before we get deeply into our conversation, Garnet, I actually want us to take a look at this package from More Perfect Union. Shout out to More Perfect Union. They do outstanding work out here. And this is a clip from a longer piece that they had posted on Twitter, but it focuses on what the ground game looked like in trying to make sure that Kansas voters were aware that this measure was on the ballot, and that it was integral that they turn out and show up and vote. So let's take a look at this package really quickly for More Perfect Union.
My name is Yasmin, and I am a volunteer for Kansans for Constitutional Freedom. Today we are going to go canvassing to make sure that all voters are informed about the August 2nd Amendment that could potentially take away our right to abortion. Whether you're a rape victim or an incest survivor, or even if you want a baby and you have complications in that pregnancy, like even those kinds of abortions will be stripped away. So we want to make sure just everybody has that autonomy over their body. It's already within the Kansas Constitution.
Right now, the Kansas Constitution in the Bill of Rights protects the right to abortion under a broader protection of bodily autonomy.
What this constitutional amendment will do is gut the Kansas constitutional mandate that allows for and affirms bodily autonomy for anyone, and more specifically, women, pregnant women.
Y'all want to hear a quick story?
Yeah.
My mother was in Seattle, Washington. She moved down here. She went on a date with a dude. I was supposed to have an older brother. But you know what? I don't have this other brother today because she was date raped. She didn't want that kid. I mean, that's a woman's rights.
I'm also a rape survivor, so I know what it's like to not have a choice. And so to know that if abortion is taken away, that those people and those people that are abused after me, that they won't have a choice is terrifying.
Since Roe v. Wade was overturned, at least 8 states have banned abortions. Kansas is now an island of abortion access. An abortion ban in Kansas would create a healthcare crisis across the region.
Post-Roe v. Wade map without Kansas is absolutely terrifying. Kansans will have to travel, Missourians will have to travel, Oklahomans will have to travel, people that live in Arkansas will have to travel. There's nowhere else to go.
Whew, I just got the chills, Garnet, by looking at that map that was featured in the piece and seeing if Kansas were to lose access to abortion, what that would mean regionally for people seeking abortion services for literally 1,000 miles. So talk to us, number one, about what was on the line last night, because it seems as though the GOP legislature there was really trying to, for lack of a better phrase, go balls to the wall with it and make sure that no abortions you could not access an abortion under any circumstances had this measure not gone the way that we wanted it to.
Absolutely. And I'm so glad you played that clip, because really all credit for this victory goes to the organizers who worked so incredibly hard on the ground to make sure people understood what was at stake here, because the anti-abortion campaign was actually lying to people and telling them to vote the wrong way in order to protect abortion rights. So there was a lot of deception going on, and you're absolutely right. This would have been an extreme change, an alteration to the state's constitution, which is really consequential, because now that there's no federal right to an abortion because of the Supreme Court decision, the only way to challenge abortion bans is in state courts. So all of a sudden, what is in state constitutions is becoming extremely important. And as we saw in that clip, Kansas is really kind of an island at the moment, surrounded by states that either have already banned abortion or are expected to do so imminently. And it's one of the few places right now that people from the Southeast and Midwest can travel to in order to get the abortions that they need.
The way that the vote broke down was interesting. Let's call it interesting. Let's take a look at that tweet, I believe, from Brian Lowry from the Kansas City Star, and they noted something interesting. So this is a map of the state of Kansas. And the journalist says, one thing that is very striking about the abortion vote map from last night, it's not just urban and suburban counties like Wyandotte County, Johnson County, and Sedgwick. Several rural GOP leaning counties like Osage, Lyon, and Franklin also voted to make sure that abortion access remained constitutional. Garnet, I mean, what do you make of that? For one, I have to say this, we know Kansas, obviously there are Latino and Black residents, but it is an overwhelmingly white state, right? And so I took this as white women came out and said, nope, nope. And I'm glad the white women did that. But I see this very much, obviously, I know how I generally assume the way that Black people and people of color would vote on such an issue. But I think the way the white women voted here is notable.
I agree. And I also think it's just more evidence of the fact that legal abortion is really popular. A majority of voters believe that abortion should be legal in at least some circumstances, if not all. And that includes Republican voters. And so that's what we're seeing here, because as you pointed out, this was a really extreme provision that would have limited all access to abortion. And there are people who believe that abortion may be wrong in some circumstances, but not in others. And so what's important, I think, is that we see here that people recognized that if you think people should be able to access abortion in at least some circumstances, then abortion cannot be illegal. And I think another really important thing to note is that Kansas has seen some of the most extreme anti-abortion terrorism of any state in the entire country. So Wichita, Kansas was the location of this country's largest anti-abortion demonstration, led by an organization called Operation Rescue in the summer of 1991. They called it the Summer of Mercy. And they brought thousands of activists who descended on Wichita and essentially shut the city down for several weeks and succeeded in their goal of forcing abortion clinics to stop operating temporarily. And the main target of that harassment was Dr. George Tiller, who was then gunned down in his church in 2009 after surviving multiple previous assassination attempts. And that very church was a polling place yesterday. So I think it also goes to show that violence also makes the anti-abortion movement unpopular. Lots of people might identify with the values that the anti-abortion movement presents. They say it's about God and the value of every human life. But when they see the lengths that anti-abortion activists are willing to go to ensure that abortion is not accessible, which include violence and murder, then they no longer want to be associated with that movement.
So when we look at the implication of this vote, the outcome of this vote last night in Kansas, and there's so many of these squirrely laws, and I hate to even that's reductionist. Let me not even say squirrely, because they're not squirrely. They're intentional. They're punitive. They're harmful, and they punish women. They punish pregnant people. And some of these laws are still enshrined in state constitutions. Is there, from your experience and your reporting and your research, is there or are there other states in which a vote like this could come up, where it could be put to the people for them to decide whether or not abortion access remains legal in where they live?
Mm-hmm. Well, there are several states where we're not going to have abortion referendums on the ballot, but abortion will essentially be on the ballot when it comes to what party is in control of the state's legislature, especially in states like Michigan, for example, where abortion is not banned now, but it certainly could be banned depending on how things go in upcoming elections. And then Kansas, also, there was this important victory last night. It's also worth noting that Kansas currently has a Democratic governor. And so whether or not she is able to hold on to that seat will also have a big effect on what kinds of abortion restrictions the Kansas state legislature might still try, even though they've lost this important ballot referendum. Because as we know, state legislatures had no problem passing abortion restrictions when they were considered unconstitutional. So I have no doubt that Republicans in Kansas might still try it, depending on how things go for them when it comes to the general election. And I think it's also important to note that in a lot of states right now, we have pre-Roe abortion bans in effect. And in many cases, those laws were passed before women gained the right to vote in the late 1800s. And so I do think we could see voters in those states maybe hopefully mobilize to try and repeal some of those pre-Roe bans in the few states where there aren't also more recent abortion bans that are kind of waiting in the wings to take effect.
Garnet, in your opinion, what does this victory last night in Kansas send to anti-choice conservatives? What message does this send to anti-choice conservatives? Because, a number of folks are theorizing that, hey, this was good that Kansas did this, but you know what? That just means that Ted Cruz and Josh Hawley are going to go to Congress to try to get a federal ban on abortion enacted. And I know people that live in blue states, they seem to think that this is unfathomable or something that is not possible. How could that be possible? Not in New York, not in New Jersey, not in Maryland. They could never outlaw abortion there. But that doesn't mean that these congressional Republicans certainly won't try to do exactly that. How likely of a scenario is that, in your opinion?
Look, I think Republicans are going to try for a federal abortion ban, whether or not they're able to get it. And I think the alarming thing about that is that we know that the Supreme Court will back them up on that. Because last night's victory in Kansas shows, as I said, that legal abortion is popular. Republicans have been claiming that voters oppose access to legal abortion for decades now, and that's never been true. And what happened last night in Kansas proves that. But we know that Republicans don't really care what voters think because a lot of their positions are extremely unpopular, but they're able to stay in power because of gerrymandering and other oppressive systems. So I think what's really concerning is that even though it is extremely unpopular, Republicans will try, and they probably will keep trying for a federal abortion ban. And the really alarming thing is that if that does pass and we end up in a situation where there's a Republican in the White House who will sign it, people can try to challenge it, but we know that the Supreme Court would in all likelihood uphold it, unless I suppose they were swayed by public pressure, which certainly has happened with the Supreme Court before. I mean, that's how we got Roe versus Wade in the first place. That really was about public pressure on the court. But now the truth is, I don't think that these justices really care what the public thinks at all.
Looking at this from an electoral standpoint, the midterms are just a few short months away, and Joe Biden, along with other powerful Democrats, have reminded us, finger wagged us, if you will, that that Roe is on the ballot, that abortion access is on the ballot, and they've used this as a carrot or a method to entice voters to the polls for a long time now. Like the Democrats have been telling us that abortion access is on the ballot. And it's deeply ironic that under a Democratic president that the Supreme Court would disallow abortion in abortion restrictive states while Joe Biden sits in the White House. But, from your reporting and from your experience and in your opinion, Garnet, is this going to be enough to galvanize voters? And I can't even just say specifically Democratic voters, because my guess is it was not simply Democrats that turned out last night in Kansas. I'm guessing it was as people across, from differing political stripes, because this is a vested issue for all pregnant people, regardless of what your political affiliation is. Do you see this galvanizing voters to the polls to make sure that candidates who support abortion access will be able to maintain that blue majority in Congress?
Well, I think one really important point also from Kansas last night is there were many more votes on this question of the abortion referendum than there actually were for the candidates in the primary elections. So in other words, lots of people turned out just to vote on that one question related to abortion and did not vote for a single candidate. Could be because they were registered independent because of the way the primary system works in Kansas, or it could be that they just showed up to fill out that one oval on their ballot and none of the others. And I think that's a really important lesson for Democrats. People care. They want abortion to remain legal. But if Democrats want the votes of those people, they have to show that they're gonna do something about it. And so far, the federal government's response has been incredibly weak to the overturn of Roe versus Wade. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are both still mostly refusing to even say the word abortion. And Joe Biden has taken a couple of steps with recent executive orders, mostly related to making sure abortion remains accessible in states where it's now banned in emergency situations. And today he also announced that he is going to issue an executive order to protect people who need to travel for abortion care. So I think at a very minimum, what voters need to see is that Joe Biden and the Democratic Party writ large are serious about that. They're going to take those steps that they're promising. They're going to do absolutely everything in the federal government's power, and they haven't even come close to doing that. That they need to show people that they're going to use that power of the federal government to protect abortion access. Otherwise, why should people vote for the Democratic Party? They can tell us they need more senators, but I'm not even convinced that if they had the votes, they would do anything right now. So they need to show that seriousness and that intention if they want people to vote for them in November.
Thanks for watching, and make sure to tune in to Status Coup's daily live stream Monday through Thursday at 5 o'clock Eastern Time and Fridays at 4 o'clock Eastern Time.